What is up, Los Angeles? If you'll find yourself a seat as close to the middle as you can, we need you to be surrounded by you beautiful people and all of the energy and amazingness that you bring. Welcome to ShadowCon 6. Yes, yes. You guys, this is really happening. We made it. I'm Zach Champagne. I'm here with my colleague Javier Garcia tonight. We're going to serve as your hosts, and by that we mean we're going to try and say and do as little as possible, because tonight it's not about us, right? Tonight we're privileged to be joined by 4 speakers who have literally waited nearly 3 years to share these stories with you. Yeah.
3 years, guys, 3 years. Deborah, Kanchan, Mandy, and Sean submitted their proposals to speak way back at the end of 2019. Our ShadowCon team reviewed dozens of proposals and basically faced the impossible task of just picking 4, but you'll get to hear these 4 folks tonight.
And as always, ShadowCon aims to do just one thing: extend the conference experience by 1, expanding access to those who can't be here live with us, by streaming and recording these talks to ensure that so those of us that are not as privileged as us to be here can experience the brilliance of these 4 speakers, and 2, to create a space where conference sessions are the beginning of the conversation rather than the end. More on that in a minute. For now, we'd like to acknowledge the greater ShadowCon family. If you've served in any way as a ShadowCon speaker, live tweeter, planner, proposal reviewer, or selection committee, do you mind standing up right now, please? Yes, give these beautiful people some love.
We can't thank each of you enough. You've played and continue to play a big part of this idea that started on Twitter just before Boston NCTM in 2015. We're really grateful to all of you. The format tonight, as usual, each of these speakers has prepared a 10-minute-ish talk. And as interesting as those talks will be, the work that happens afterwards is what we're most excited about. After each talk, each speaker is going to let us know how to sign up to continue the conversation. But if you want to choose later, you can always go to www.shadowconmath.com to sign up.
And this year, each speaker chose their own path in how they're going to run the follow-up work. They decided what made the most sense for their ideas. They'll each tell you a little bit about that at the end of their talks, and we hope that you'll join them on that journey. And for those of you that are at home right now, watching live on YouTube, those are words that I didn't know existed previously, but they do. There are folks watching live on YouTube right now. We hope you'll be part of this story as well. So please go ahead and sign up. And before we get ready to introduce our first speaker, I do want to also acknowledge that we have incoming President Kevin Dykma and some board members here. If you guys stand up, can we say thank you to NCTM? Yeah. We're grateful for this partnership. We're grateful that you guys continue to support this little weird, quirky idea that we had a few years ago.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Before we introduce our first speaker, we have one important disclaimer. Our final talk tonight includes a story with potentially triggering content that includes stories of physical abuse and suicidal ideation. We encourage you to use discretion, and please feel free to excuse yourself before the talk.
Folks, tonight we hope that you're challenged, we hope that you're inspired, and we hope that you find some new friends. Most importantly, we hope that you'll continue to engage with these ideas after this live experience. So for now, please join me in welcoming ShadowCon alumni Tracy Zager as she introduces our first speaker.
Hi, everybody. It is my honor to introduce Deborah Peart. I must say a few more things about her. So Deborah is the founder of My Mathematical Mind, and she speaks on a variety of topics related to math identity and literacy connections to mathematics. Blending her training in yoga and mindfulness with mathematics instruction, Deborah advocates for a mindful approach to teaching mathematics in order to address math anxiety, build confidence, and support the development of positive math identities. As a mathematics content specialist at Unbound Ed, Deborah works with a team to develop and implement professional development programs for K-12 mathematics. Prior to joining Unbound Ed, Deborah was the lead writer for second grade for the Illustrative Mathematics Elementary Math Curriculum Project, which is how I first got to know Deborah when we were an Alpha Pilot District. And so we got to work with the writers, and she's amazing. I lost my spot. Hang on. Now based in Florida, Deborah taught for over 25 years in New York, Connecticut, and Georgia in the public and private sectors. She has dedicated her career to helping other educators approach teaching in innovative ways that allow students to see themselves as valued mathematical thinkers and lifelong learners. And I feel so lucky that she's in my life, and I can't wait for you all to math with Deborah. Deborah Pear.
All right. I am so glad to finally be at ShadowCon. Hey, you all have no idea what it took to get here, literally. But I'm most excited that I finally get to share the message of Mathers Gonna Math with you. So, show of hands. How many of you remember the moment you fell in love with mathematics? All right. Okay. Now, how many of you remember the moment you fell out of love with mathematics? Yeah. For me, that moment was in 4th grade. I fell out of love with mathematics because when I asked questions, I was called sassy and I was called rude. So in 4th grade, I decided I am not a math person. And I embraced all things language arts because in language arts classes, I was celebrated for my curiosity and creativity. I was encouraged to share my ideas. And most importantly, I did not get in trouble for asking too many questions. Now, make no mistake, I still did the work. And I made all A's because that was the expectation in my house. But there was an emotional detachment, and I counted down the days till I could stop taking math. And I want you to consider, why is that? Why does that happen specifically with mathematics? I believe that we have an abundance of individuals who do not consider themselves to be math people, and we have a shortage of students going into STEM because we insist on calling them mathematicians. I know somebody is mad at me right now, but that's okay. That's okay. Because I want you to imagine a teacher calling all students mathematicians all the time, but the behavior and habits that are rewarded and celebrated in math class are finishing quickly, doing all the challenge problems, yes, and also being the one who's constantly raising their hands. And then a student observes those behaviors, and they think about how mathematics is represented in media, and they decide, well, I think real mathematicians are the smartest and the fastest, and of course, they have really wild hair and thick glasses. And since he doesn't identify with any of those things, he rejects mathematician as a part of his identity, but he also decides that he probably doesn't really need mathematics, because if only certain careers require mathematics, then he could just choose a different path, because he struggles, asks lots of questions, and doesn't always get the right answer. So, why is it that so many people think that math is optional? Where did this idea come from that there's an end to the math journey? Interesting thought. Well, it's historical for one. Colonial America had the focus of reading and writing skills and classic literature in formal education, and mathematics was reserved for elite boys ages 12 and over. And when mathematics made it to the common schools, it was taught using, get this, the rule method. As in, the rule for a problem was presented, the students memorized the rule, and then came drill and practice. And, by the way, girls were not taught the rules. Does any of this sound familiar? Even today, reading and writing are taught and explained as skills that we need for life, to navigate society, to be successful, and to make sense of the world. You gotta read, it's fundamental. And even if learning to read is challenging, we persist. And we persist because we know we need reading to be successful in life and to pursue our dreams. And even if we hate it, no one gives us permission to opt out. Reading is not attached to one specific career path because it's a skill we need for life. And the same is true for writing. Even when really young children are really just scribbling, we encourage them to keep writing just right. Because after all, writing is needed for communication. And you can't choose a major in college where you are not gonna have to ever write again. That's what I thought about math though. And even if you're not good at it, you can't give up. You are not given permission to decide you just won't write anymore. You might not become a journalist, but you're going to be some kind of writer. Now let's talk about mathematics. Somewhere along life's journey, we got the message loud and clear that mathematics is not for everyone. You have to be really smart to do it. It helps if you're quick. And if you struggle or fail at any point, then you are banished from Mathlandia, and you are definitely not a math person. Our view of mathematics is skewed, presented as all or nothing. Failing fractions should not equate to failing at math forever. And then we have this interesting thought that if we could only go back to the way they used to teach it, then everything would be just fine. Spoiler alert, the old way is not better. So what do? How do we fix this? How do we move forward? I have an idea. We need to rebrand mathematics. And we can start by redefining the core academic skills. Instead of reading, writing, and arithmetic, we could change it to reading, writing, and reasoning. Or, if we're willing to let go of the notion that we need to have 3 R's, particularly since we never actually had 3 R's, just saying, arithmetic, we could agree that the 3 core academic skills are reading, writing, and mathing, because math deserves a verb. And if readers read and writers write, it only makes sense that mathers math. So we change our language and we introduce a new term, mather, which simply means a person who uses mathematics to make sense of the world. That way, mathing is something that everyone does all the time. It never goes away. You don't get to opt out, and it's not scary, right? Maybe. How about if we called children mathers from the very beginning? And we were intentional about creating positive math experiences and help them see math in the world all around them. Because mathing should feel natural. There doesn't need to be a designated time and place to do math. Anytime, any place, math is gonna math. Students also need to have choices. I like options. You like options? We are all mathers, and some of us will choose to be mathematicians. So I propose, I know it's gonna be a little scary, that we kind of abandon this whole mission to convince everyone they're math people and take the pressure off kids and stop calling them mathematicians. Sorry, not sorry. I also want us to stop attaching mathematics to specific career choices. Stop saying things like, if you want to be an engineer, you're going to have to do lots of mathematics. Because when I struggle, what I also hear is, so if I don't want to be an engineer, then I won't have to do a lot of mathematics? Okay, that works. I just want to be an engineer. We need to help students envision a future where mathematics takes on different forms and supports them in their pursuit of their dreams. Imagine this, students who actually believe that math is a part of their identity they never have to lose, no matter their test scores or the path in life they choose. We need to celebrate all the ways that we are mathing together all the time, because we are mathing when we are sharing snacks, when we're recognizing patterns in carpets and ceilings, when we're cooking, when we're creating music and art, and the list goes on and on and on. Mathing is something that never ends, and no one gets to opt out of it. And if we start these conversations early and have them often, maybe the next time you ask, "What are you doing in there?" your answer will be, "Oh, I'm just mathing." Mathematics has been stolen from generations of learners. Some have been directed off the path before they reach their final destination of mastering mathematics, while others took the exit ramp with no return access. This is the legacy we've inherited. But what if we reframe our thinking and reframe our language, and we make sure that there is a strong, solid foundation in mathematics for everyone? Maybe we'll have less math trauma, less math shame, less math anxiety, less math avoidance, and maybe we'll have children and adults developing into competent mathers who are willing to face problem solving with confidence and persevere in solving those problems. And maybe students will approach high-level math courses with confidence in their abilities and choose to pursue STEM careers. And maybe they'll choose something else, but they will keep on mathing. And maybe, just like we hear people say, dancers dance, singers sing, readers read, it will be common to hear mathers math. And teachers will invite their students to join them by saying, "Everyone, come math with me." Just so we're clear, I am not a mathematician because I didn't choose that path. But I am a veteran teacher. I am an author on a math curriculum. I am a math content specialist. I am a math consultant. And most importantly, I am a mather. Wouldn't you like to be a mather too? I've invited a little someone along to share how she feels about math because she already joined the mather movement. Let's see what my little princess has to say.
What other kind of math questions do you ask?
I ask, like, when I'm 13, how old will you be?
Oh yeah, you like doing those all day. Do you consider yourself a mather?
Yes,
Why?
because math is fun and that's just how I like it.
Math is fun, and that's just how I like it. I had the pleasure of teaching this little mather virtually during the pandemic, which was her kindergarten year. She was not a fan of math. But as the year went on, she fell in love with it as she realized she was mathing all the time. I was 6 years old in that picture. A curious little mather whose spark was snuffed out. So my question to you, how do we ensure that the little Debbies of the world don't fall out of love with mathematics by 4th grade? It starts with healing and rebranding. We need to work together to build a community of mathers who share the enthusiasm of this little diva who is proud to say she's a Black girl who rocks math. Thank you. I hope you all will join the Mather movement. As they shared earlier, if you didn't get a chance to scan the QR code, you will be able to get the information from the ShadowCon website. And we've chosen to create an interactive digital bulletin board you'll be able to interact with, where we'll share our math stories. And we also are offering 2 virtual sessions, Becoming the Mather Your Kids Need You to Be, and Building a Community of Mathers Through Routines and Discourse. And finally, in the meantime and in between time, please use the hashtags MathersGonnaMath or Mather Movement when sharing pictures and posts of your mathers mathing on Twitter and all other social media platforms. Thank you so much.
So much, Deborah. Folks, I am feeling so much joy being with you here right now. I didn't know how bad I needed this over the last several years. Do you feel the same way? And all this joy I got going on right now has me wondering a question, which is, if we were to survey like 1,000 kids at random and ask them to describe math in one word, how far down the list would you have to go to hit joy as an adjective? Moreover, if you went outside the doors here and grabbed 100 people, or just kept on surveying people, asked them to describe mathematics, how many people out there would use joy to describe math? And even still, like, math teaching itself is a profession that struggles for joy sometimes. And for all those reasons, I'm so excited to introduce to you folks Kanchan Kant, who embodies joy in mathematics more than just about anybody I've ever met. Joy to her students in Massachusetts as a math teacher, joy to her colleagues as a department head, and also joy in various equity initiatives she's a part of in Massachusetts more broadly. I'm just so thrilled to have an infusion of joy for all of us here today. Please join me in welcoming up Kanchan Kant.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to ShadowCon and supporting us today. It is a Guinness World Record at this point, and NCTM can take it. It's been 3 years. You will never find people more prepared for this talk ever. So, all right, here I go. So, my name is Kanchan Kant, and I was about to say I'm a mathematician, but I'm a mather. I'm a mather, I'm an engineer, and I'm an educator aspiring to engage all students with the beauty of math. So today I would like to invite all of you to join me on this journey. So as classroom educators, what are questions we all hear whenever we introduce a new topic? Anyone? These are my top 3. Why do we need this? When are we going to use this? Where the heck do you expect me to use this? So, and I don't blame the students, I don't fault them. I used to ask the same questions. When I was in high school, my education was very traditional, very formula-based. We had worksheets and sit in rows and all of those things. So students are not to blame at this point. But every time they asked me these questions, I noticed I was answering them with real-world applications, and that's it. And then, whether it was something as simple as using probability to figure out which number is most likely if you're playing a game with 2 die, or that could be using calculus in quantum physics. Anything which I answer, sometimes that was satisfactory and sometimes not so much. Sometimes it was of no interest to that student or not appropriate for that grade level. And then there came a time when my students asked me, you will not believe this, why do we learn complex numbers? And in the moment, I could not come up with a relatable, practical application for a sophomore class. So this is what I want you to do. Turn to the person on your right. For 30 seconds, talk about, has this ever happened to you? What topic was it? What did you do? Okay, coming back together in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. You guys are such good students. Now, I want to take you into my math sophomore classroom, where we explored the reason for learning complex numbers. So I started the lesson by asking my students why we need natural numbers and why, as humans, we started using them. Then we went on an exploration of invention and discovery of actually numbers, especially 0, around the world. That led to an amazing conversation about the advancement of human race and our evolving needs. Now, through this whole lesson, my students figured out that there came a point in our evolution that humans had all the numbers that they needed for counting. So they started using numbers for making shapes and constructing buildings. That is when they came up with irrational numbers. My students came up to me and they were like, do you know what, Ms. Kant? At the same time when this was happening, halfway around the world in Iran, Al-Khwarizmi was writing a book, Kitab al-Jabr, to teach the world about algebra. I was like, wow. So we had this most insightful and joyful conversation about the need of math for survival and need of math for exploration and discovery. That's when I introduced the concept of complex numbers as a way for humans to explore equations which do not have real solutions. That was the first time not even one of my students asked me why we are learning this. They were engaged, they were understanding the concept, their reflection was super positive, and it marked an important milestone for our learning community as a turning point because we understood the importance of learning mathematics. That was the day my students finally realized that they are creators of math and not just receivers or doers. And once they became these explorers through these exercises, they wanted to make meaning of math. And the way to find that joy was to connect different concepts and aspects of mathematics. As an example, they connected geometry and algebra to figure out characteristics of a triangle. They used the box method to make meaning of polynomials. And when they were doing this, they were much more engaged, not just with each other, but also with the content. Most importantly, they were connecting different aspects of math and driving their own learning. And one of the highlights of my year is to use math online visualizer tools to have students play with math. And the way I do that usually is teach algebraic functions where they explore it using these tools like GeoGebra and Desmos, and we culminate the unit in a final assessment using the Desmos art project. Thank you, Desmos. So students plot these functions on Desmos, and then they play with its domain, range, and inequalities to create a piece of art which represents a significant aspect of their identity. Now, I would like to read out a reflection from one of my students who made this piece of art that you see on the screen. The project that truly helped me see a bridge between art and math was our Desmos art project. Once we looked at the various examples of what it is possible to accomplish with a series of functions with imposed restrictions, I was in awe of how beautiful equations could be. Over the next month or so, as I pushed myself to write equations to create a detailed humpback whale, I felt a shift in my thinking. As I looked at the world around me, I caught my brain subconsciously trying to figure out how to translate an organic shape, for example, a tree branch, with a series of equations. Not unlike my thought process when trying to draw something. I would think, if I were to graph this, I would use a quadratic here, then a cubic there, and then a radical one for this one over here. This part's kind of rough, so I'm going to use several straight lines to recreate it. It was pretty incredible. I could literally feel my brain rewiring itself. projects like these, my students were learning to play with math, but they were also learning to create beauty with math and see how everything is connected. And beauty with math is not just created. It can be found in nature, in abstraction, in architecture, and for someone, even in the ups and downs of the stock market. Recognizing that math is the universal language which connects everything, showcases its innate beauty of how things are connected. And it is a way for us to engage our students, irrespective of their background, their interests, their skills, or their grades. For a high schooler, that could be, oh, let me figure out how to get to school fastest. I'm going to do a traffic data analysis. For a for an elementary school student, that could be, let's say, let me find flowers which petals open up into the golden ratio spiral. Ultimately, the objective is to create in students a love for math. Because if we let students explore, express, and discover themselves with math, they develop a love for the subject which transcends content and grades. To that end, I would like to share one final story with you from my school. So our juniors were tasked to show the freshmen around the school. They decided to do that with, hello, a math treasure hunt. They used the murals around the room, around the school, to create clues which would tell the students, oh, this is where you need to go next. So as an example, they asked the freshmen to calculate the slope between these two murals, which were on two ends of a staircase, and that would give them the room number to the nurse's office, where they would get their next clue. This project was entirely conceptualized and executed by the students. I had no role to play, which showed me their love and excitement for the subject, and also their enthusiasm for sharing it with the rest of the school community. For freshmen, it was such a fun way to learn about the school culture, reduce their anxiety, and most importantly, ignited in them a spark for love of the subject. So this is what I usually do in my classroom. I ask students to reflect on their learning for the day so that they can make it their own. They can make meaning of their learning. I would like to ask all of you to do the same. Take a moment. Think about everything that you heard today in my talk or some other talk, and then one or more things that you would like to take back with you. Here are a few ways that I thought of to find joy in teaching math and learning math, so that we can engage all our students, not just in the uncountable applications of math, but also with its explorations, its connectedness, its meaning, its playfulness, its beauty, so that we can instill in them a love for the subject which is authentic, which is genuine, and which carries on with them after high school as well. Thank you. Class dismissed.
Did y'all see that invitation to go have drinks with Kanchan and think about, did you see that? Okay. So I need all the mathers in the room to meet at the bar to talk about joy. Okay. No, I'm Kanika. I'm super excited to introduce our next speaker, Amanda Jansen. And I could tell you, I could read out her resume and I could tell you that she's an amazing professor, keynote speaker. I could talk about her service leadership and the ways in which she's led in her local community and also abroad. I could tell you that she's an author, talk about her titles, but I think what I've come to find is an amazing and important thing to let you all know is that Mandy, who I've come to know, is a genuinely authentic human who is so kind And more importantly than that, she's seeking to pursue a more empathetic practice as an educator. And so, without further ado, I welcome Mandy to the stage. You are in for a treat.
Thanks so much, everyone, for coming here tonight. This is what I'm going to talk about, but before I begin, I have a confession. My name is Mandy, and I failed the physical fitness test in junior high. That picture is the flexed arm hang. Did you have this in middle school? Yeah. Okay, this flexed arm hang, there were some girls in my class who could hang out on that bar for what felt like days. I couldn't do 1 second. PE class was like this for me all the time. 50-yard dash, I was last. Field day, more like torture day. Skills test in PE, can you serve the volleyball over the net? No, and I'm gonna show you in front of everyone. Awful. So just take for a minute and think about your thoughts about this physical fitness test. What words come to your mind? A quick 5-minute search on the internet gives us words like this: soul-crushing, humiliating, sadistic, traumatizing, and demoralizing. And I relate. Once PE was no longer compulsory for me after 9th grade, I was set. I couldn't do it, so I didn't have to do it. Awesome. Some of my friends exercise. I feel like they drank the same kind of Kool-Aid, right? They would say things like, working out is my me time. What? What's that? Exercise reduces stress. That's cool for you. It causes stress for me. Exercises gives you endorphins. That can't be true. Emperor's new clothes. So I decided for me, I'm gonna be a brain on a stick. I like school. I'm gonna be an academic. I'm gonna do math, major in math. I'm gonna be a math teacher, and then I'm gonna become a professor. It's just my brain, that's all I need, right? PE class for me was like this: a process of performing poorly over and over in front of everyone. It was so embarrassing. So I just thought I would avoid it at all costs. And I could. I didn't have to take it anymore after 9th grade. It didn't impact my college major. It didn't impact my career choices. But I was a 7th grade teacher, and some of my students, for them, unfortunately, math class felt like this, right? And now I teach future elementary teachers in college and future middle school teachers, and not all of them, but some of them feel like this about math class. But for me, I could avoid the thing that made me feel bad. I wasn't required to take more PE, so I felt like a hypocrite. Here I was encouraging students to have a growth mindset. Persist in the face of challenge. You learn from your mistakes. But yet, I could run away. So it was really only about 7 years ago where I decided I probably need to face the thing I'm avoiding. How could I ask my students to do something that made them feel anxious when I was avoiding doing the things that made me feel anxious, right? So where could I begin? I thought, okay, I'll try yoga class. I don't know if I can do any of those things, but at least I can get meditation out of it. So, being me, I emailed the owner of the studio and I asked a whole bunch of questions, like, what if I don't know what to do? And what if I can't do the things? And she said, it's okay, because you know what? Showing up is enough. You just have to try. Effort is enough. If you just continually show up and try, you're gonna gradually get better. And so I chose to believe her. And I said, what if I can't get in that contortion and touch the floor? And she said, we have options. The blocks make the floor come up to you. So that was cool. And we focused more on performance. It didn't matter if you could get into a specific pose. What mattered is over time, I can now do the tree pose without touching the wall, right? So it's gradual growth over time, not performing at a certain level. And it's individualized, not competitive. So if I can't do a certain pose, I'm not gonna hold the whole team back, right? So that felt better, and I chose to keep coming, and I did gradually get stronger and stronger. And I started to feel braver about taking on new challenges. So one of my yoga teachers started a paddleboarding business. This looks cool, right? I grew up in Arizona. We don't have a lot of water. I live in Delaware now, and so when I can get out on the water, it's an amazing experience, but I didn't think I could do this. So I asked my friend who started this business, I said, do you think I could actually paddleboard? And she said, well, if you can do some of the balance poses in yoga, you're probably good. So I thought I would give it a shot, and that's me. Yeah. Okay, but this is not the first day I paddleboarded. This is multiple sessions later, and there's something important to notice about this picture. I have shoes on. I can normally have more balance. I have more balance when my shoes are off. So on this day, I'm doing a sweep turn, and that happened. Yeah. So I'm back in 8th grade, thinking, okay, here I go. I try to do something, and I get another message that this is not for me. I can't do this. I feel like I'm back on the arm hang, not able to do what other people can do. What happens next? My friend, the instructor, she dove right in the water with me, and I was like, what's going on? And what happened was she knew I was nervous, that I wouldn't be strong enough. You have to have a lot of upper body strength to get back on the board. So she held the board for me, and then I was able to get myself back up. So that process, what happened after I fell, is we're in a group paddleboarding, and everyone started telling all their stories about all the times they fell too. Because, of course, everyone falls sometimes. It's just part of the experience. And her process of diving in that water with me made me really think about this. How do we be with our students in those moments? How do we experience that moment with them where we support them while allowing them to still do the work and the thinking? Yeah. So, again, we know the theory. We know about growth mindset. We know about productive struggle. We can preach it, but what is it like to experience it? There's emotional intensity, right? When you go through those moments of putting yourself in those uncomfortable spaces ourselves. Maybe for some of us it's math, and maybe for some of us it's something else. But being in that space when we're challenging ourselves beyond our comfort zone helps us experience what our students might experience. So I wondered, how can my math classes feel more like my experience in my yoga classes or paddleboarding? So a few thoughts about that. I really want every student that comes into any one of my classrooms to know that I already see them as enough. When you enter my classroom, you come as you are, because any ideas you have already have brilliance in them. Any initial ideas and attempts that you have are going to have strengths that we can build upon. I'm not focusing on us fixing each other. We're focusing on understanding each other and gradually improving together and assuming brilliance. So this also makes me think about practices in our teaching that can focus on gradual growth. I think about our assessment practices, where we may have students build portfolios, where they articulate how their thinking has grown, or mastery assessments, where their performance isn't timed based, only based on a unit test at a particular time. They can come back weeks later and show how their thinking has grown and changed gradually on its own time scale. And I learned about this thing that people who do sports, they call about personal records, a PR, a personal best. That's a thing. And so what is that in a math class? I'll tell you what it's not. It's not a timed test of how many problems you can do in a short period of time. That's not a PR in math. So what could be a PR in math? Maybe it's a new connection, a new insight that you didn't have before. You understand something more deeply, and that is your personal best. So what would happen if we truly dive in with our students, where we face our own challenges so we can practice greater empathy for our students' experiences and the efforts they put when they show up every day and do the math with us? So I would just like to invite folks to continue the conversation. I'm imagining an asynchronous space and then maybe some synchronous times where we think together, what hurdles in our life do we avoid or have we avoided? And how can taking on one of those hurdles help us facilitate mathematics learning where students truly know that they are already enough? So thanks. Thanks for being here.
Hello. I'm delighted to introduce you to Sean Nink, an award-winning teacher, an author, a curriculum writer, and maybe most importantly, a dad. Sean's current research includes creating equitable spaces for all student voices while integrating students' passions into K-12 classrooms. There's a quote that reminds me of Sean: "Courage doesn't always roar." I want to recognize his immense courage in putting together the story he's about to tell you. Please welcome Sean Nink.
Welcome to ShadowCon Chicago. Oh, no. Welcome to ShadowCon Georgia, St. Louis. I don't know, where are we now? Los Angeles. Welcome to ShadowCon Los Angeles. Woo! It took a while. How's it feel to be here? I know, it feels pretty good. Before I start, I want to say a couple of things to my wonderful speakers. I think we all look good in our dresses today. Best part about wearing a kilt, you don't have to check the zipper when you're going on stage. So, I'm the reason why they gave the disclaimer. So I'm going to pause for a moment before I get started with my story that I'm going to tell you. And I'm just going to acknowledge that this is a sensitive subject matter. And I'm also going to say that I will linger in this room. And for those of you in YouTube world, and whenever you watch the video, you will have my information. I want to be that person to have that conversation with you that your soul needs and you haven't had. So I'll be here as long as you need to talk about whatever you want. If there's anything that's brought up about your past, I want you to tell yourself these 4 words. It's not your fault. The reason why I'm talking about this today is because I want to create space to see what math means to our students. Because students are living things I'm going to talk about right now. I'm going to go back into the classroom on Monday, and I have students who are dealing with these types of things. And if we don't take time to see our students, they're never going to see the mathematics. It's important that we see them first. So, I don't have a lot of memories when I was growing up. I have maybe 2 or 3 concrete memories prior to middle school. One of those concrete memories is when I was walking down my elementary school hallway, and I noticed that I started counting all the tiles. Say that to somebody who's not a math person, and they have no idea what you're talking about. They just think you're kind of weird. But then I realized I wasn't going to be able to count all the tiles. So instead, what I did as I walked was I started counting the number of times that I stepped on each different colored tile. This is going to make sense in a second because I'm going to tell you a lifetime secret. I've kept this to myself my entire life. It's taken a lot of work and a lot of effort to do this, and I'm going to blow it in the next 5 seconds. But first, I want to realize that as I was supposed to take this to my grave, there came a point in time where I read a book about a man who outed himself in his mid-50s, hid dyslexia his whole life. So I figured life's too short, death's too long, and our students are too important. So, thank you. I'm also going to take strength from my daughter. Stand up, please. Okay. She has ADHD. She was diagnosed in the middle of 2nd grade, and she has owned it with pride her entire life because she realizes that that is a part of who she is, but that is nowhere near who she is. She's been bullied throughout school, in dance, but she's always beautifully accepted herself for who she is. And I realize I haven't been doing that. So I'm going to do that right now in the next few seconds and say no one knows until now that, this is harder to say than I thought it would be. Oh, and by the way, I did tell my family a couple hours before, so don't act surprised, that I have OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. Took 5 seconds to blow 4 decades of a secret. Great, no turning back now. There's some misconceptions about disabilities, and we know as math teachers that if you have certain disabilities, they're exacerbated in mathematics classrooms. Take my daughter, for example, with ADHD. There's a reason, oh wait, squirrel. That doesn't mean you have ADHD if you get distracted. It just means you like squirrels, maybe. Same thing with OCD. If you like your pencils neatly in a row, that doesn't mean you have OCD. If you clean your house for a couple of hours, that doesn't mean you have OCD. It just, well, it means you're a clean person. The point in time where you realize you might have OCD is when you're frozen in repetitive thoughts illogically linked to consequences. One of the points in time where I realized that I had OCD was when I was standing there getting ready to go to work, staring at a stove over and over again for 45 minutes, not able to leave, knowing that I could leave if I just wrapped my head around the fact that everything's going to be okay. But what happened was I would look at it, I would walk away, and as I'm walking back the 17th time, something happens in your brain to where if you do not go back and look at that one more time, something bad's going to happen. And it has nothing at all to do with the stove. There's different types of OCD. I am organization, which means this is a true picture. Last place, by the way, working out is great. The last place I worked out in a public setting, it went from looking like this to looking like this. And that 30 right there that's slightly off bothers me to this day. So I do not have contamination, so hug me whenever you want. I do have intrusive thoughts. My intrusive thoughts are not of harm coming to me, it's of harm coming to the ones that I love the most. I do not have ruminations, but I do have checking. To the extreme, I have checking all the time. When I walked up those stairs, I did it in a pattern that corresponds to my OCD. The thing about OCD is you have to have a biological predisposition, but then something usually needs to happen in your environment to trigger it. And my environmental trigger was an abusive household. I would use compulsion to escape my thoughts of abuse. Just to kind of set the stage a little bit, in my house, it's kind of like I've seen tornadoes start to form. You start seeing them swirl. And you know that there's nothing you can do that's going to stop that storm from coming. That's kind of like what it was like growing up in my household, where you heard the words, you saw the anger, you searched for a way to stop that storm from coming, but you knew there was nothing that you could do to stop it from coming. I went back this summer to take a picture of the house that I grew up in middle school. Something happened one night in this house. And this is a point in time where I'm going to tell you, I'm going to leave out most of the details, but I am here for any conversations. I'm an open book. If you want to hear them later, just ask. But I will tell you that this night in particular was pretty bad. First, my mother started with the belt. Then she handed it to my father. He started beating me until he lost control of the belt. It wrapped around, hit me in the groin, and I fell to my knees. He continued and told me he wouldn't stop until I stood back up, and I believed him, so eventually I stood back up. He was a man of his word, and he stopped, and the last thing I remember that night was falling back to the ground and passing out. The next morning, I realized that, and now also, There's scars that we carry with us, and we all have some to certain degrees, and we learn to bury those scars so deeply that we forget they're there. For me, I don't think about this night all that often, but every once in a while, there's a couple of scars left on my body from this night, and when I catch a glimpse of it, I think, oh yeah, that really happened. The thing about it to realize is you start learning to question reality. It's a matter of how can the same hand that reaches out to you in love an hour later reach out to you with such anger and hatred? And you're filled with a sense of despair. How can I know so much and control so very little? The next day I was walking down this very street to my middle school classroom, and I was thinking about one thing the entire time as the buses were going by. I was thinking about this chair. Now, there were times in the past where I used to go in after a night of being abused and sit in the chair, and I could always cope with it because if it was on the back, I could lean forward, I could tilt one of my butt cheeks up, or if it's on the lower part of your thigh, you could go up in releve. Yeah, I do ballet, sorry. You can go up in releve and you can keep the part of your body off the plastic. But on this particular morning, I knew I was gonna have to sit still in this chair all day, and there was no way I was gonna be able to pivot. So I made a decision. I decided that there's only a finite amount of pain that I could go through in my life. What if I took all the pain that I was gonna have to experience and just put it into one singular moment? I decided definitively at that moment that the next bus that came along, I was gonna commit suicide. The thing about that realization is when you come to that point, it's not a matter about wanting to die, it's more a matter about not wanting to live anymore. And as I was walking down, I saw this tree, and my OCD kicked into the extreme. This was taken in the summer. I should have gone back in the fall and taken the picture. The leaves had fallen, you could see the branches, and I started OCDing this tree like crazy. I started counting all the branches. And then I realized there's no way I'm gonna be able to count all the branches, so I started thinking to myself, what if there's a pattern to these branches? And if I can figure out the pattern to the branches, then I don't have to count all the branches, but I'll know all the branches that were there. And as I was sitting there counting all the branches, the bus went by. And I missed it, and I heard it. And I didn't care because I was just stuck in the mathematics of this tree. And that's the reason why I say mathematics saved my life. Now there's a thing about this. Let's start getting into the mathematics. I didn't know at the time, but this was all about fractals. The branches, the striations. And the thing about fractals is I'm not gonna read the definition because the definition's a little boring to me. Instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the origin of the term. It's Latin, it's fractus. It translates as fractured or broken. So there I was, fractured and broken, looking at something that by mathematical definition is fractured and broken. So the fractured and broken part of the tree, nature, mathematics of the tree, triggered my fractured and broken OCD, which changed the most and saved the most fractured and broken part of myself. And then I started to realize after that, once I learned what fractals are, is they are everywhere. They're in our lungs, they're in our veins, they're in the leaves, they're in the sky, in the lightning, they're in the rivers, they're in the sand as the water washes back to the ocean. Right about this point in time, you might be thinking to yourself, where's the math in this talk? And that's all the math you're gonna get in this talk because I don't wanna contradict what I'm about to say next, which is, in my opinion, there is way too much mathematics in our math classrooms. Thanks. Let me say that a little differently. There's way too much of our mathematics in math classrooms. Because my mathematics that saved my life never existed in my math classrooms when I was a student. So what I'm asking here is, where's their mathematics in our math classrooms? I don't know if you've seen this posted on social media before. I totally get this picture. It resonates with me. I mean, I think formulas and equations are beautiful if we do it right, but I see what they're saying about the beauty and the pattern and playing with ideas in mathematics. That's what we want our classroom to look like, but I'm gonna push us a little farther, and I'm gonna say, if we're talking about the beauty of mathematics, whose beauty, whose patterns, and whose ideas are we talking about? Because it's all still mine. There's a Buddhist saying, the finger that points at the moon is not the moon. I think about that a lot in terms of mathematics, and that the symbols are not the mathematics. It's pointing to what the mathematics means. And in that same vein, the mathematics is within us all. So even when I'm talking about math, I'm not talking about math. I try to create time and space for my students to be comfortable to tell me their stories so that we can learn together. Like there was a student about a month ago who came up to me and said that they were getting their blood drawn. We started a conversation. They were feeling me out to see if I was amiable to that conversation. And then they bridged the conversation to they got their blood drawn so they could get a baseline because they were going to start hormonal therapy and transitioning. We started talking about the mathematics behind that, but I'm going to tell you right now, even though we've talked about that mathematically, the math in that conversation did not matter nearly as much as that person. Every single subject matter is just a different way of making sense of our world. My way of making sense of the world, especially with the OCD, is mathematical. But all of the mathematics I used never came from the mathematics classrooms that I was a student in. And I know I might offend some people. I mean, no offense. But when we say we want to rehumanize mathematics, I get what you're saying, but I think we are hitting the target and we are missing the mark because we do not need to rehumanize mathematics. Instead, what we need to do is stop dehumanizing it. I want my students to know that they matter more than the math. I want my students to be a voice, their voice, not an echo of my voice. Because profound things happen when one human being lets another human being know that their voice matters. Yeah, tell the mathematicians' stories, tell our stories, but I tell those stories so that I can make way so I can hear my students' stories, both mathematical and non-mathematical. I'm glad I literally and metaphorically missed the bus. But I realized before and after that, my experience in math classrooms was a sense of being enveloped in an embrace of logical calmness, which helped me to escape what was going on at home. I still have OCD. I still have organization, intrusive thoughts, and checking. And I want to take just a second to apologize to, well, my daughter, and to, don't cry, you're going to make me cry. Aw.
Hey, love you.
Love you too.
Probably left a stain on your cheek.
And some lipstick. So I'm just going to say I'm sorry for lying to you my whole life by omission, but this kid's a rock star. When I told her a couple hours ago that I had OCD, her first words were, "Wait, what?" And then 5 seconds later, she's like, "That explains everything." So, and I share that sentiment with everybody I've ever loved before and known before. I'm sorry that I lied to you about part of who I am. So here's my call to action, a mild call to action. Thanks. No, I'm not selling t-shirts. They're free. There's not too many of them, but if you want to grab a t-shirt and wear it tomorrow, my math story is great, but I want to start hashtagging your math story. So if you want to put a shirt on, do so, but you make the commitment to wear it tomorrow and go to people and ask them about their math story. Sure, share yours with them, but let them share theirs, because I'm sharing my story with you today so that you can share your story with others, so we can get ready so our students can share their stories in our classrooms. This is 0 caffeine needed, not much effort. Another mild commitment, and all of this is going to be on my website, www.seannank.com. So don't worry about remembering it all. This year I decided that I usually put a bunch of stuff up on my walls, and it's things that the students don't care about. So I stripped my walls. I put 10% of my walls were for me. The other 90% started like this. I left blank, and I told students, bring things in that you're passionate about. Put stuff on our walls that makes you happy in our math classrooms. There's a couple other mild calls. This one's a little more in-depth, some caffeine needed. I created with a colleague a passion project where you group students according to their passion, and the project is them making a 2-minute video where they find the grade level appropriate mathematics inherent in their passions. I want to hear their passion through the mathematics. Another one that I'll offer with much caffeine needed is a series of 3 workshops, because if anybody tells you they've figured this out, I don't think they have. I haven't figured this out. I'm still trying to. But I want to come together so that we will realize the answers to the questions we haven't even thought of yet in terms of creating more space for student voice. So I'm going to say, join me. That was some heavy stuff. Take a breath. Let's go relax after this. Let's have a beer or more. Let's maybe dance a little bit, laugh, but more than anything else, I want to be there to be able to hear your stories so you can hear your students' stories, so we can see them so that they can see the mathematics. And to encapsulate the entire evening, I'm going to try this off the cuff, and I'm going to say, let's dive into mathematics while becoming a mather, having joy in it, and tell our stories about it. So, thank you.
Wow. So that's it. That's ShadowCon 6. We've just heard 4 great talks by 4 incredible, extraordinary people. There is a whole community of folks that helped this all come together. I just want to acknowledge them one more time. Let's hear it one more time for everybody that is involved. Woo! And if all of you folks in the audience here or watching at home would like to get involved, shadowconmath.com, or you can go back and check the way to get involved with each of our 4 speakers. But thank you guys so much for being here. Let's go have some fun.
Good night, y'all.